insight into the Audio Description Association's professional development session that took place on the afternoon of Wednesday the 24th of February 2021 on the Zoom online platform, Interpretation and Subjectivity, hosted by Jenny Alborn of the Audio Description Association and Anne Hornsby of Mind-Eye Description. This 2-hour session was more an exploration and discussion of interpretation and subjectivity, rather than a comment of what's right or what's wrong. This brought together 35 representatives consisting of panelists, audio describers, service users, and industry professionals. Anne Hornsby kicked off proceedings with an insightful introduction, highlighting the guidelines, history, and context of interpretation and subjectivity. The aims and objectives were to provide a platform for discussion around interpretation and subjectivity in audio description, to gather feedback from listeners and colleagues, to open up debate, to learn from peers and listeners, and thus hone our skills. It's about revisiting and exploring, taking the lid off Pandora's box, and possibly putting it back on again firmly. It's not about telling you what to do. In the session, we welcomed describers from many different countries and backgrounds, some TV, some theatre, some other areas, many with years of experience and others relatively new, as we all have something to learn from each other, and discuss the foundations of how describers first tackled this in the early days, and use Les Miserables as an example of how much information to give. She also discussed the differences in visual arts and dance, and her experience of describing for the computer voice, and also touched on describing diversity. We were then introduced to the panel for the session, who consisted of Julie Bennett, totally blind and appreciates any audio description. Her bugbear, certain audio describer accents. Edward Coppersroe lost his full sight at an early age. He uses AD for theatre and museums primarily, and was a very active visitor before the pandemic. His bugbear is too much information. Paula Succi, visually impaired for 50 years, resides in Milton Keynes. Audio Description Association member, enjoys theatre and TV AD, and any audio description is better than none. Her bugbear doesn't like the word guy instead of man. And Claire Berman from Ipswich has a small amount of vision and enjoys most audio description. Her bugbear is the use of unnecessary AD when not needed and uneven audio levels. How the afternoon worked was we were all shown excerpts and examples of video with AD or photos, and then there would be an exchange of ideas between the users in the room and the describers or professionals. In the first session, 2 clips were shown. An Australian program first up called The Interviewer with audio description, and secondly a clip of Home Theatre's Manchester's production of Good Grief, which was mostly music and mime, also with audio description. After these samples, Anne discussed with the panel their thoughts on the use of language and subtext, and many interesting aspects were discussed, including not to take for granted that someone may not know what someone may look like from a specific word or description. Finally, to finish this part of the session, a photograph of a man classed as cute and scruffy was shown, and describer Jane Brambley gave a detailed description of this, and the panel highlighted how certain aspects of language are very open to interpretation based on the individual's own experiences. After a short break, the 35 participants were split into a small group and went into separate breakout rooms that each had a panelist in with a visual impairment. After being presented with 4 photographs, those sighted and describers in the room were asked to choose a photo to write a description for and read out to discuss, and all were very different and distinctive. The breakout session lasted for 15 minutes before we all returned to the main room to discuss further. The final part was led by Chair of the Audio Description Association, Neil, and shared very different ideals and opinions, resulting in a very diverse and satisfying discussion. The topic of subjectivity and interpretation is so complex and open that it could fill an entire weekend conference full of discussion and debate, and hence why it was such a satisfying subject for a professional development session. Our continuing professional development sessions are the ideal setting to raise your awareness, find out something new, and network and make connections. For more information about the Audio Description Association, about this topic, or to make a suggestion for a future professional development session, email audiodescriptioninfo@gmail.com. I'm Tim Calvert, and this feature was produced for the Audio Description Association, March 2021. Before the session came to a close, some of the participants talked about what it meant to them, which was recorded, and this is included here.
Yeah, and we just thought it would be lovely as a little record for us, really to capture kind of some of the breadth and unanswered questions perhaps that will have come out of today. So we'll just go round, and if you could just tell us one thing you're going to take away, whether that is something that you feel you've learned, a quote or an image that's stuck in your mind, or a question that you feel is, you know, completely unanswered by the session. You will also be getting a feedback form by email, so you know you can save kind of detailed feedback for that. But it would be absolutely lovely to just hear some of your voices today. And that could include the panel members as well, if you would like to say anything. So I will include you while we are going around, but possibly at the end after the describers. So I'm just looking at who's still got their cameras on. Could Ali Clark, are you up for going first, as you're first on my list?
Yes, okay. I think something really positive today was in the group discussion to have a panel member there and have instant feedback from a service user. So that was something really, really positive. The one thing I think in a session like this that's always difficult is that when we're describing, we're always doing it in a context. And in this sort of exercise, we don't have the context to work in, but I thought it was really interesting and very, very useful. And thank you very much to the panel member for some really great input. It was really food for thought.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ali. Joe, did you want to say anything?
I would just second that. I think it's been a really worthwhile, valuable afternoon. It's been terribly well organised. I know there's a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes. For Anne, well done, Anne, and Jenny and others and the panel members. I just thought I just feel really energised. It's been lovely to see all your faces here on screen and to have this opportunity to just to reconnect and to share ideas in such a lovely, you know, positive and supportive atmosphere. So I just think, well done, Ada, well done, all of us, and keep going. I don't really have anything much to add. I mean, this is such a melting pot. There's always so much to discuss. And when you're doing some kind of exercise, as we did, it's like, you know, cracking eggs to make an omelette. We're always asked to feed back at the cracking egg stage, and we'd all like to go away and then work it again and hone it and come back and offer our finished product. But people came up with some really nice thoughts in the discussion, and everybody engaged well. So I just feel really buzzed by it. Thanks, everybody. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Joe. Di Langford?
Oh, yes. It wasn't just this session, really. I just become more and more aware of how valuable it is, if not essential, that we have users involved in our discussions. That makes such a lot of difference. And also knowing things like someone may not know what a Down syndrome person looks like, and there are certain other things. I remember a blind person not knowing, a Canadian not knowing what taking the knee meant, and those sort of things that to us are very obvious, but to someone who is visually impaired, they mean nothing. So those are things to be aware of.
Thank you, Di. Steph?
Sorry. I just think it was hugely valuable for two reasons. One is I think the subject matter that we've just touched on is really important that we continue to explore. I mean, it's certainly held up a mirror to my own lack of awareness in certain areas today, and it's given me a huge amount to think about. But also the second thing is that I feel really, as somebody has just said, energized to reconnect with audio description after such a long space away from it. So thank you, Anne, and thank you everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Great, thank you, Steph. Laura?
Yes, well, I am so thrilled by the fact that all of you do so much within this area, and I'm so amazed that this is actually happening, as this is not something that we have as an offer in Denmark. I really appreciate the fact that you make this panel, and I think inviting people who are the end users is a very important factor. I have people that I speak to here to sort of, ask sort of what would this image be something that resounds with you, and I think that dialogue is very, very important for the young people and the older people, because there are different references, also for the genres and all of that. I really appreciate being part of the discussions, and so happy that you would take the time to make panels like this and open up for discussions. I think it's very, very valuable. And also to hear all the different opinions from the audio describers. And it's a learning process for a long time for myself and for the people that I will refer back to, the handful of ADs that I'm in contact with in Denmark. And so thank you very much. I'm really happy to have been part of this.
Thank you, Laura. Just on that note, regards kind of keeping up this kind of communication, Tim's just dropped me a message to remind me that we Ada does do monthly Zoom calls where you can connect with other describers who are members. So if you're not receiving that information, do get in touch with us, or we'll send it out with the follow-up from this session. Trish.
Hi there. Well, yes, I mean, obviously we're all saying the same thing, that it's just been great to all get together and share the information and to listen to you guys. It was such a well put together couple of hours, and it's always good to go away with even more questions that you want to keep working through. But I thought it was a great use of the exercises as well. It really sort of engaged the thinking quite immediately as well, and really for me so helpful to have, having been someone who used to work in a theatre and I guess took it for granted that I had contact with customers and service users all the time, whether they were audio description users or captioning or sign BSL performances or what have you. I'm sort of out of that world now, and obviously learning the world of the audio describer, and it's kind of putting those two worlds back together again, and having access to the user panel today was just fantastic, because it was that immediate feedback, very generously given and sensitively given, but so immediately useful. So that was fantastic. My sort of go away to think about it some more thing is, I think possibly something that Edward said quite early on about thumbnails and using short thumbnails and shorthand. And as a new describer, I'm still sort of learning my way through the when is too much and can I shorten it down, but then I don't want to fall into the interpretive category or the making assumptions or subjective category. So it's that real tricky balance between, could I have just said punky makeup? Would that have been the same thing as what I actually said, which was a full sentence? I don't know. So these are things just to continue to interrogate, let's say, and maybe there'll be another seminar on that later. Who knows? But no, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. We've just got about 3 or 4 more describers who are still on camera. Mo?
Reiterating how useful it's been. I don't want to use up the time by repeating all the praise, so I will just say that it's reminded me to be aware of the need of different genres to have a different density of description. So if you're doing if you're describing a dance with low key, slow music in the background, you can put in a lot more detail. But as Anne was saying, if the film is flying by, you haven't got very long to squeeze in a detail. I would say that I've always felt if there is more detail, the user can remove an earphone or something. But if there's not enough detail, there is nowhere else to go to except us. And I think I'm always struggling with getting that balance so that Edward has his minimal, you know, pared back description that lets the piece shine through, but that people who enjoy more detail feel satisfied and not left wondering all the time what exactly is going on. And I think that's just an endless dilemma for us. But each performance piece probably demands its own density of description, and I think it's about us tuning into that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mo. Anna.
Okay. So just the same as what everyone else has said, it's been really useful for me and really interesting. And I haven't described for a couple of years now, so it's really given me enthusiasm to get back into the theatres when the theatres reopen. And I think, as everyone else has said, really opening up questions that perhaps I was asking when I was doing my training and then haven't asked that often since then. Particularly right at the beginning when we watched the film clip with the gentleman with Down syndrome. When I was describing regularly, I was in a theatre in Aberdeen, and most of our service users were people who had lost their sight later in life. And they wouldn't have had a problem at all with that description. They would have known exactly what was meant. And it was just a reminder to me that everyone is different, and the service users I knew in Aberdeen might have had, you know, it might be different. It'll be different in different places. And I'm still thinking about how I would describe that particular gentleman if I wanted to describe him in another way. So it's given me lots of questions to go away with. And thank you very much to everybody for that.
Thank you, Anna. Megan.
Hi, as usual, thanks for letting the American in. I have two things I'm really gonna go away and think about a lot. One is this thought of parity versus equivalence. That's a really interesting concept to me that I had never really thought about. So that one I'm going to have some sit down time with. And the other thing I think is really interesting is there were about 35 people on the call, I think, and the vast majority of us are white women. So that idea of diversifying the audio describers for different types of things and how important that is. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Our last describer who's on camera is Jane.
Oh, well, follow on from what everybody else said, but also from what Laura said. I think I've got a lot of things I will ask myself routinely. I always used to ask myself, how do you know? But at the top of the new things is, what will an AD user make of this? I think it's pushed it up my list, my priority list, compared to how it was before. And I'm very grateful to the panel.
Great, thank you, Jane. Panel, I'm not going to put you on the spot to say something, but I'll give you the opportunity. Claire, I can't see you. Is there anything you wanted to say that struck you about the session?
Well, firstly, I just want to thank you all, because I've realised how important audio description is to me. For example, if I turn the television on and there's a programme without AD, I just switch it over. So that's how big a part of my life it's become. But today, I suppose as an end user, I never really considered how difficult it is for you describers and how sensitive you have to be choosing the exact language that's not going to offend anybody. I was just always concentrating on the end result and, you know, hearing the information that I needed to hear, and I never really appreciated the dilemma that you guys face. So I should be going away and thinking about that a bit more.
Thank you, Claire. The other panelists, I can see you all, so give me a wave if you would like to say anything. Okay, Catherine?
Yeah, 3 points. I'll try not to take too much time. Thanks for doing this. It's been really good to meet, so-called meet the describers and understand the dilemmas you have. On that dilemma about do you use quicker, sort of more signal type language like punky makeup, or do you go into the details? I think that's always going to be a dilemma, but I just wanted to say that I think it partly depends on the piece you're describing, and partly that's a chance when it's, if you get the chance, that's when you can use different things like show notes or Q&As with the artists and different things where people can choose if they want more information to use those other things as supplementary things. I think that's where they shine. And the third thing I wanted to say was, going back to that piece we were listening to, I think it was called Good Grief. I think all the panelists, we all had quite a different reaction to it. There were some people that said, I'd never go and see this, and some people said they really enjoyed it. But I think we all thought the description was really, really helpful and crucial. And I think that shows at the end of the day that that's what the description is an important part of, is so that people enjoy arts in different ways and we all react in different ways. And if that's what it's all about, really, to me, is so that then you have the description, so then you can engage in a discussion or you form your own opinion about stuff. And that's yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm sure Anne will be heartened by you pointing out that it wasn't necessarily the description that some people didn't enjoy about that particular piece. Julie. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, very, very much backing what's already been said. To me, when I lost my sight, I lost, well, everything really, because it was unexpected. And turning on the television, I couldn't follow anything until somebody said, right, you can get audio description. And every show that you see, you just get a skeleton, you get the bones. With audio description, you get the flesh to put on the bones, and it just makes the whole experience so much more meaningful. And yeah, well, it just makes it an enjoyable experience. It's very difficult, as Claire said, to shorten. If you asked me to describe one of those pictures, I probably would have written you an essay. I'm always in favour of using 500 words instead of 50, but yeah, and that really is an art that audio descriptors do have, to be able to get something down to, just the flesh, the bare bones, to add on to the bare bones that you are watching. It's easier in the theatre, I think, because like has just been said, you can have the notes before the performance, you can sometimes meet the actors, you can feel the costumes, possibly you can get up and walk on the set, and you have a lot of information about the characters over the headphones. Unfortunately, this is normally half an hour before the show starts, when everybody is rustling around trying to get into their seats, but you do get it. And some theatres even send you CDs prior to you visiting, which is brilliant. Unfortunately, there's not enough in the West End that is audio described, and equally, not all theatres do audio description. I'm living in Dorset at the moment, near a big theatre, the Octagon Theatre in Yeovil, and they don't audio describe anything. They have a massive range of theatre, of dance, drama, music. Music obviously isn't so much of a problem, but there's no audio description whatever. And I think it should be law to have audio description on anything that is being performed, whether it be on television, cinema, theatre, museums, or whatever. So we need a panel to start off a campaign, I think, Jenny, something else for you to do. But again, it really it really has been a pleasure, and I think if we are wanted again, I'm sure we're all more than happy to come along and offer support. So thank you for letting us take part.
Thanks, Julie. Paula, you were waving.
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel this afternoon. I regularly come to the Audio Description Association forums that you have, or that we have, since I'm on the executive, sort of on a monthly basis, and I think they're really worthwhile. Obviously, I'm generally more of a bystander because a lot of it is discussion between describers, and I've found it really very fascinating, and I chip in where I can. But yeah, so thank you for this afternoon. And what I'm really looking forward to is July, when I hopefully will be sitting back in a theatre, attending an audio described performance. That would be absolutely fantastic. Hopefully having been jabbed first.
I would imagine you speak for us all, Paula. So, we're all looking forward to that. Edward, I haven't come to you. Did you want to add anything?
Yes, I'd be very happy to. I think that reiterating all the thanks and congratulations to you for organising it, and thank you for including us in your event. It was a revelation to me, the extent to which it felt like there was a struggle to get it right. And actually, for audio description, for me, it's the audio describer is a performer. They happen to write their own script as well. But as an audience member, I'll go a long way to meet the performer in their performance. I never got offended by my granny saying she'd had such a gay time, because she'd been having a gay time since she was a girl in the 1920s. And that was just her manner of speech. And I don't feel so strongly about being up to speed on the most correct way of describing things, especially in the context of things which are not set in the modern era. If it was a 1960s transvestite, then I would expect that person to be described as a tranny, and it wouldn't cause me any offence or distress to see that it was appropriate to the period. So I wonder if there's I suppose I'm alive to a fear of getting it wrong, which I was completely insensible to prior to today. And I hope it doesn't slow things down in terms of enabling more people to come to audio description. And I think the other thing I was not aware of before was that in the context of describing frame by frame, particularly for video rather than for theatre, the sense of having to do it frame by frame was seen as the correct way of doing it, when in fact, in so many cases, a tiny bit of scene setting at the start of the scene can replace the need to describe the action. I was remembering that by breaking the rule of privileged knowledge, Veronica Hicks, when it's in the opening scene of The Crown, she says, we're in the library at Sandringham, the king is at his desk. Well, of course, to anybody else, Colin Firth is in a country house library. But by giving us that knowledge before it even starts, she has to do much less interfering between the dialogue as it goes through. And in addition, I think she slipped in a line just saying it's cold outside. So we suddenly knew it was winter. And I just by putting that stuff in the beginning and not describing action, but scene setting, it seemed to me that there was much more emphasis in how to describe detail rather than setting scenes. But maybe it comes back to that point of equivalence again. Anyway, I've really enjoyed it. And if Joe's still on this call, I'd be glad to receive a membership form, because I think what you do is enormously worthwhile, and I'd be pleased to support the organisation.
Thank you, Edward. I'll absolutely put all of the panelists in touch with Jo so that you can sign up for memberships if you would like. And I think that's such a brilliant point to close on, about not letting fear of getting it wrong get in the way of access, which is obviously what audio description should first and foremost be about. Thank you all so much for doing that. Hopefully that will just give us a nice little record of some of the things that have been spoken about today. So I'm going to stop recording now.
Our continuing professional development sessions are the ideal setting to raise your awareness, find out something new, and network and make connections. For more information about the Audio Description Association, about this topic, or to make a suggestion for a future professional development session, email audiodescriptioninfo@gmail.com. I'm Tim Calvert, and this feature was produced for the Audio Description Association, March 2021.